Wife who abandoned me during my hospitalization returns after 12 years, begging for forgiveness. Cheating wife who abandoned me during my hospitalization now seeks forgiveness after 12 long years. Hi, I'm Jason, 47M. I want to share my story here and hopefully get some advice. This takes me back 12 years, to when I was married to Susan, my first wife. We had been together for 7 years and had 2 beautiful children, Laura and Lucas, who were 5 and 3 at the time. Life was normal, predictable, even happy until one fateful day changed everything. The accident that changed my life. One morning, while driving to my office, a speeding vehicle from the opposite direction rammed into my car. The next thing I remember was waking up on a hospital bed, covered in bandages and plasters. The nurse informed me that I had been in a coma for 2 days. I held my doctor's hand and thanked him for saving my life. I was grateful to be alive. But I had no idea that my real nightmare was just about to begin. A week into my treatment, my doctor delivered the devastating news I was paralyzed from the waist down. There was a high chance I would never walk again. I was shattered. Susan broke down when she heard, clearly overwhelmed by the thought of managing our home and children alone. Depression hit me hard. I spent my days staring at the empty walls of my hospital room, cursing fate for turning my life upside down. I dreaded the things I would never be able to do again, playing soccer with my kids, dancing with my wife, or simply walking freely. Then, as if my suffering wasn't enough, Susan started to disappear from my life. The betrayal. At first, she brought the kids to see me 3 times a week. Those visits were the only thing keeping me going. But slowly, they became less frequent. I begged her to bring the children more often, but she would brush me off, saying, "They don't want to see you that much." Then one day, she came to my hospital room, handed me divorce papers, and said, "I definitely can't spend my life with a handicapped man. I'm still young and desirable. I deserve a normal man." I had sensed the distance growing between us, but I never expected this betrayal to come so soon or so cruelly. A month after my accident, friends started telling me they had seen Susan in cafes and malls, walking hand in hand with a middle-aged man. Some believed she had been cheating on me even before the accident. Others said desperation had driven her into the arms of a fat, grumpy old man, someone well-off who could offer her a comfortable life. Barely 2 months after my accident, while I was still in the hospital, she was already gone. I might sound calm as I write this now, but back then, I was devastated. I was paralyzed, broke, and abandoned. Every penny I had saved had gone into household expenses and our children's education. Thankfully, my insurance covered most of my medical bills, but even so, I had to liquidate my remaining savings. In the end, I was left with nothing. I wanted to scream, to smash my head against a wall, to curse fate for everything it had done to me. But somehow, something inside me kept me sane, perhaps the burning desire for revenge. Starting over from rock bottom. After being discharged, I moved in with my parents. I was 35 years old, divorced, jobless, and completely dependent on my 62-year-old mother. My mother was a florist who ran a small shop in the suburbs. Her tiny income, along with her pension, kept her afloat. Despite her struggles, she offered to support me. The thought of being a burden crushed me. Desperate to see my children, I went to our old home, only to find it locked. Neighbors informed me that Susan had moved in with her new lover. Apparently, the man was wealthy, divorced 3 times, and had no children. Many labeled Susan a gold digger for settling with a man she barely knew. Determined, I tracked down her new address and went to her house, hoping to see my kids. She didn't let me in. "They've already adjusted to him," she said coldly. "They even call him Daddy." My sudden presence, she claimed, would confuse them. When I pleaded, she threatened me with a restraining order. I didn't have money to fight back legally. I was barely surviving on my mother's meager income. So, I walked away. Less than 6 months after my accident, Susan was happily living with another man. I was still trying to piece my life back together. I asked her how she could abandon me so easily. How could she move on so fast? She laughed. "You're a burden," she said. That's when I finally asked, "Did you cheat on me before the divorce?" She rolled her eyes. "That's none of your business. Now, leave and don't ever show your ugly face again." I stood there, replaying our 7 years of marriage in my head. This was the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children, and she had erased me like I never existed. I left in tears. That night, I sobbed in my mother's arms, feeling completely humiliated and broken. But she told me something that changed everything. "You are not finished. You will rebuild. You will rise again." The rise from nothing. At first, I had no clue how to start over. I was a man in a wheelchair with no income and no direction. So, I started small. I helped my mother in her flower shop. I arranged bouquets, cleaned the store, and served customers. Then, something clicked. I realized the business had huge potential, but my mother was too fragile to expand it alone. I reached out to old contacts and secured contracts with event management companies. We started supplying flowers for events. Over time, I built a team, took on bigger contracts, and eventually launched my own event management company. It took me 12 long years to rebuild my life from scratch. But I did it. And my mother stood by me every step of the way. Susan's last move. A year after my accident, I found out that Susan was leaving the city with my children and her lover. I rushed to see them, but they had already gone. For the next 12 years, I tried to track them down. Every time I got close, Susan threatened me with legal action. Her rich boyfriend had money and connections, and I had neither. That man never married her. Finally, a year ago, after years of hard work, I was financially stable enough to file for joint custody. The court granted me 15 days with my children. Susan fought hard to stop it, but this time, I had a good lawyer. The judge also asked my children if they wanted to see me, and they said yes. For the first time in 12 years, I would finally get to see my kids again. But I was nervous. What had Susan told them about me? Would they hate me? Should I tell them the truth? I had no idea. And so, I turn to you. What would you do in my place? I missed 2 critical pieces of information in my original post. First, about my current wife, Amy. Yes, I remarried a beautiful woman 5 years ago. Amy is an interior designer. I met her at an event where she was designing a wedding venue, and we were providing the flowers. At that time, I hadn't yet started my own company. It wasn't love at first sight, but we clicked immediately. We kept running into each other at different events over the next few months and eventually became friends. Amy was a single mother to a 3-year-old daughter, Mia. She was the one who suggested that I start my own event management company since she had worked in the industry for years and had the right contacts and expertise. I partnered with her, and together, we built the business. After dating for a year, we got married. Today, we are a happy family of 4: Amy, Mia, my mother, and me. Mia was overjoyed to have a grandmother, and my mother was just as delighted to have a granddaughter. The second missing detail: accident compensation. I was hit by a speeding truck, and legally, I should have been compensated by the logistics company that owned it. However, at the time, they manipulated the facts, pinned the blame on me, and got away without paying anything. Back then, I was in no position to fight them. I couldn't afford a lawyer. You know how these big corporations operate. They spend a fortune on legal teams to ensure they don't have to pay a dime. After my marriage to Amy, she encouraged me to reopen the case since we were now financially stable enough to hire a competent lawyer. The case is still in court, but my lawyer has given us a strong indication that the judgment will be in our favor. Now, back to my story. As I mentioned in my original post, 3 months ago, my children were supposed to visit me after 12 years of separation. I was overwhelmed with excitement and nervousness. Amy, as always, remained my pillar of support and kept me grounded. I went to pick them up from the airport. Laura, my eldest, is now 15, and Lucas, my youngest, is 13. They had grown into beautiful and handsome teenagers. After the initial greetings, the conversation quickly ran dry. It was awkward for all 3 of us. On the way home, I tried to break the ice, asking about their school life and the city they lived in. I deliberately avoided any mention of their mother, and interestingly, they did the same. The children were unusually quiet, or maybe they were just looking for an excuse to plug in their earphones, as most teenagers do these days. When we arrived home, Amy greeted them warmly. Their expressions, however, were filled with shock, as if they hadn't expected this. I couldn't understand why. Their mother had been living with another man for years. Why was it a surprise that I had moved on as well? Amy had prepared everything for their stay, setting up a cozy guest room just for them. We had lunch together, and she laid out the vacation plans we had carefully put together. Their reaction was neutral. No excitement, no objections. Just indifference. Amy and I exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to make of their response. They soon retreated to their room. Not long after, my phone rang. Susan's interference. It was Susan. She was furious, accusing me of tricking our children and manipulating them by bringing them to my house. I felt disoriented by her sudden aggression. She kept ranting about how I had deceived them, failing to inform them about my marriage to Amy. I simply hung up. But she kept calling. I knew there was no avoiding the issue. It was time to confront the elephant in the room. Revealing the truth to my children. I called Laura and Lucas and asked them outright. "What's wrong?" They hesitated. Then, after a moment, they spoke up. They were angry with me because they had been told that I had abandoned them. Susan had brainwashed them for years, feeding them lies, making them believe that I had chosen to disappear from their lives. I took a deep breath and told them the truth. I told them how it wasn't me, but their mother, who had moved on so quickly, leaving me for another man just months after my accident. They were still young at the time, but even so, they vaguely remembered those days. I reminded them of how their mother had completely cut me out of their lives, moving them in with a stranger while I was still in the hospital, recovering from my injuries. I showed them the restraining order Susan had placed against me, preventing me from seeing them. I showed them all the rejected petitions I had submitted just to be able to visit them. Tears welled up in their eyes. They regretted believing her lies. Lucas, my son, admitted that he had once tried to contact me on social media, but Susan caught him. She emotionally blackmailed him and made him promise never to reach out to me again. Then came the part that truly broke me. Both of them admitted that Susan's boyfriend had never been a father figure to them. In fact, they had been mistreated at family gatherings because Susan was merely a mistress in that household. Although the man had funded their education, he had never once treated them like his own children. Hearing this crushed me. I had spent 12 years believing that they were living a comfortable life when, in reality, they had been suffering in silence. Rebuilding our bond. After all the truths came out, we hugged and cried together. To make up for lost time, we took a week-long vacation to Florida. Laura and Lucas bonded with Amy and Mia, who was now 8. Seeing them all together, smiling, for the first time in years, I couldn't have been happier. When we returned, they met my relatives. My family welcomed them with open arms, rekindling bonds that had been severed for over a decade. Before they left, they made a promise. They would keep in touch, no matter what their mother said. They confessed that their home life felt suffocating. And then they said the words that made my heart swell with hope. "Once we finish high school, we're moving in with you." I hugged them tightly and sent them off. Susan's fury. Back home, they confronted Susan about everything. But Susan, being Susan, turned the tables, accusing me of manipulating them against her. It's been a few months since their visit. Despite her threats, my children and I have kept in contact. I hope to have them back home with me soon. I'll update you if anything changes. Thank you all for your support. Hey everyone, here's an update. I know it's been a while since my last update. The past 6 months have been filled with unexpected twists, and trust me, the drama hasn't stopped. After reconnecting with my children 3 months ago, something else finally came to a resolution: my court case against the logistics company. A victory in court. After years of battling, the case was finally settled. And guess what? I won. Not only did I receive a hefty compensation for the accident itself, but I was also compensated for the injustices of the first trial. If you remember, when I first tried to get compensation years ago, the logistics company manipulated the case and falsely pinned the blame on me. As a result, I was left with nothing. At Amy's suggestion, I reopened the case, and this time, justice was served. When I shared the news with my children, they were ecstatic. They wanted to see me again, and I assured them that I would have them back in my life permanently. But just as things were starting to look up, Susan reappeared. The return of my ex-wife. Out of nowhere, Susan showed up at my office. She grabbed my hand, looked me in the eyes, and asked for forgiveness. I was completely taken aback. She admitted that after my accident, she had been desperate, and in that desperation, she had made choices that she now regretted. She told me that she had found an older man who was looking for a sugar baby, a term I wasn't even familiar with until I looked it up later. Apparently, this man had bad experiences with younger women who had scammed him for his money, so instead of going after another risky fling, he chose someone more stable, Susan, who was 32 at the time. Having 2 children made her seem like a safer investment to him. But there was a catch. He made it clear from the start that he would never marry her because he didn't want to share his inheritance with my children. Susan, desperate for security, agreed because in return, he promised to take care of her financially and pay for the children's education. Why didn't you just get a job? I asked her point blank. Why didn't you just get a job and take care of them yourself? She shrugged. She admitted that she had never worked a day in her life and had no idea if she could make enough money to maintain the lifestyle her sugar daddy provided. She insisted that everything she had done was for the children. That she had sacrificed her dignity to protect their future. That if she had made a different choice, they would have grown up in poverty. At that point, I had enough. I snapped. I told her that if she truly cared about our children's future, she would have at least given me a chance to recover instead of abandoning me the moment things got tough. Instead, she had assumed the worst about me and jumped at the first opportunity to secure a comfortable life for herself. I told her straight up that I had moved on. Her apologies meant nothing to me. The ultimate insult. At first, she tried to guilt-trip me, reminiscing about our wedding day, the birth of our children, and the years we spent together. I shook my head. That's the past. I'm not that person anymore. Those memories? They don't mean anything to me now. And then, she crossed the line. She looked at me and said, I am your real family. Not Amy. Not Mia. Mia isn't even your daughter. You can never have a proper family with them. I felt disgusted. I looked her straight in the eye and said, Amy and Mia are my family. You're nothing to me anymore. She refused to leave. She created a scene in my office, demanding that I take her back. It wasn't until I threatened to call the police that she finally stormed out. My family's reaction. That night, I told Amy and my mother what had happened. Amy was understandably upset, but she handled it with the maturity and grace I've come to love about her. My mother, however, was furious. She told me she had never liked Susan because she had always been selfish, and now, she was only coming back because of the money. That woman was a gold digger, through and through. The kids take a stand. When my children found out about what their mother had done, they were disgusted. They stood up to her for the first time in their lives and told her to stay in her lane. But here's where things get interesting. Apparently, her sugar daddy found out about her little attempt to get back with me. And guess what? He threatened to kick her out if she ever tried to contact me again. I won't lie, I laughed when I heard that. The best news yet. Now, for the real update. My children are moving in with me this month. They'll be staying with us for a while before heading off to college. They want to experience college life and live in a hostel, which I completely understand. We'll keep in close contact, but I also want to give them the space and independence they need. As for Susan, she's completely alone now. She has lost her children. And the only thing she has left is her sugar daddy. I hope she enjoys the sugar while it lasts, because sooner or later, it's going to turn sour. Ha ha. Final thoughts. This version improves the flow, emotional impact, and readability while keeping the story engaging and natural. Let me know if you'd like any final refinements.